dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
And you're back for our final segment on Liberty Nation Radio, heard coast to coast on the Radio American Network. I'm Mark Angelides. We're continuing our conversation with Tim Donner. So, Tim, we've covered the Virginia Attorney General's race, the Virginia gubernatorial, the New Jersey gubernatorial, and the New York City mayoral election. So let's try and wrap this up in a neat little bow. This was an off-year election where the party who's just won the election, it's the first opportunity for voters to say, I wasn't happy with that election result. Do you think that the narrative here will be long-lasting enough to have any impact on next year's politics, specifically the midterms?
I don't think the results here in 2025 are going to be any kind of factor, because there's way too much that's going to happen between now and November of 2026. I think it's going to rest on the economy because, between the tariffs and the trillions in new investment that Trump has attracted to the country, and his real push for economic growth, if that succeeds, I'd say the Republicans have a chance to stave off defeat in the House in midterms, because going into it, clearly the Democrats will be favored, as the out party almost always is in the midterms of a new president. So for the Democrats, it's a matter of defining their brand. Because every Democrat will be accused of being another Mamdani, and how they respond to that will determine whether the party's going to move even further left. Because we also have, it looks like, a new mayor of Minneapolis out in Minnesota, who's a socialist as well. Socialists are on the ascent, and moderates, so-called moderates in the Democratic Party, are teetering. And we don't know where the party's going to be, but the image of the party, the branding of the party between now and next November will be critical. Will they be seen as more Mamdani, or they will be seen as more a John Fetterman party? I think that's the big question.
I would change I know it's your analogy and you're welcome to it, but I would change that a little bit. Is it the party of Mamdani? And you chose John Fetterman there, who is such an outlier in terms of his points of view, in terms of his even his voting record, and how he speaks about his own party. But I wonder if it's more a case of Mamdani or Chuck Schumer. Now,
Yes.
I think that's close. But also, is Chuck Schumer, your opinion on this, Tim, is he going to face a big threat from AOC?
Almost certainly.
I think,
and I would say that AOC, stands more than a puncher's chance of knocking him off. Now, that race, Mark, I'm glad you brought it up, because that will define. That really will define the Democrats' attempt to establish their identity. But the biggest advantage that they'll have going into next November is the same that they had in November here in 2025, which is that Donald Trump will not be on the ballot. And considering that there's a lot of people that voted for Trump who don't even like the Republican Party, they like Trump, but they don't necessarily like the Republican establishment. I wouldn't put any money on the Republicans being able to hold the House, although they have more leeway in the Senate, where they can afford to lose 3 seats and still hold control of the Senate.
Yeah, I think that the Senate, doing the electoral math, the Senate looks a lot safer. Even though the things have actually kind of flipped, haven't they, since the last election cycle, 2024, where it was Democrats largely defending seats. This cycle, it's largely Republicans defending seats. But there's a lot more safe seats there. And I just wonder how much damage will be done to the party if there are some really vicious primaries from the Democrats, because I don't see how AOC can challenge Chuck Schumer in the primary and not create some wounds that will continue to bleed across the country. Because
well, I think you're absolutely right, but I think it also means it's going to encourage, animate other left-wing Democrats, progressives, to challenge more traditional liberal members of the Democratic Party. I think you get a number of primaries within the Democratic Party from the socialists who are on the ascent. But, socialism has never gone over in this country.
Yeah.
And, in 2020, they ran every candidate out of the race, including Bernie Sanders, the presidential race, because they knew he couldn't win because he's a socialist. So they basically cleared the field for Joe Biden because he was perceived to be a moderate. Of course, he governed then as a progressive, but he did not campaign that way. So there's a reckoning coming in the Democratic Party. And I think the AOC Schumer contest is what's going to frame it.
There's something coming back to the New York City mayoral race. It was notable to me. We did discuss this earlier in the show that it was over 2 million votes were cast, which was the highest since 1969. But Andrew Cuomo, former Democrat governor of New York State, he got over 850,000 votes, and that would have won him any mayoral election in the last 32 years. Right, the only person who got higher in recent history was Rudy Giuliani in 1993. And so that kind of tells me that even though Mamdani had a huge victory here, the pushback was equally seismic in many ways.
If you told me that Curtis Lewa, the Republican, was only going to get 7 or 8% of the vote, I would have said, well, Cuomo might really have a chance. Evidently, a lot of Lewa voters pivoted over to Cuomo. But also, Mark, how about the Republican Party of New York City? Could they not come up with someone better than the eccentric guardian angel Curtis Lewa? He's always been a fringe candidate. And Republicans have won before with the likes of Giuliani and Michael Bloomberg, but they had no one serious to put up this time.
I hear Tim Donner's calendar is free for 2029. Thanks for being here, Tim. Much appreciated.
Always a pleasure, Mark.
And that's all we have time for on this week's edition of Liberty Nation Radio, heard coast to coast on the Radio America Network. I've been your host, Mark Angelides. I'd like to thank our guest today, Mr. Tim Donner, Liberty Nation's senior political analyst and longtime host of this here radio show. And of course, thank you, the listeners, for taking the time each week to tune in and join us on the show. You are appreciated. Please remember, Liberty Nation does not endorse candidates, campaigns, or legislation. This presentation is no endorsement.
We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.